Lysander Hawthorne walked through the grand halls of Hawthorne Academy, his presence commanding attention. The polished marble floors gleamed under the bright lights, and the walls were adorned with portraits of past alumni, each depicting a legacy of success. Lysander was the centerpiece of this world of privilege, dressed in the latest designer clothes, his confidence radiating like the sun. Laughter and whispers followed him as students parted to make way, their eyes filled with admiration and envy. But then, amidst the sea of privileged faces, there was Oliver Finch. A quiet boy with tousled hair and worn-out sneakers, Oliver stood at the edge of the bustling crowd, invisible to most. His heart raced as he watched Lysander, the epitome of everything he wished he could be. Oliver clutched his school project tightly, his palms sweaty with a mix of anxiety and desperation. Gathering his courage, Oliver took a step forward. "Lysander, can I ask you something?" His voice trembled slightly, barely audible over the chatter around them. Lysander turned, his expression shifting from amusement to mild annoyance. "What is it, Finch?" he replied, a hint of disdain coloring his tone. I need help with my project. It's due next week, and I thought maybe you could..." "Help you?" Lysander interrupted, his laughter echoing through the hall. "Why would I waste my time on you? You're not even in my league." The dismissive tone hung in the air like a heavy cloud, a stark reminder of their contrasting worlds. Oliver felt the heat rise to his cheeks, shame flooding his senses. He nodded slowly, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Right, sorry for bothering you." With that, he turned and walked away, each step heavy with the weight of rejection. As Oliver left, Lysander felt a fleeting sense of superiority wash over him, a strange satisfaction in maintaining his social standing. He watched Oliver retreat, a shadow among shadows, and felt nothing. The world around him continued, laughter and chatter resuming as if nothing had happened. But for Oliver, the moment was defining. He moved through the halls like a ghost, invisible to the laughter and light that surrounded him. The rejection cut deeper than he expected, leaving him feeling isolated and small. He could hear the whispers of other students, their conversations blending into a dull roar. But he felt detached, as if he were watching from afar. Meanwhile, Lysander turned back to his friends, their laughter a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped Oliver. "Can you believe that guy?" he said, shaking his head. "Some people just don't know their place." His friends chuckled, and Lysander basked in their approval, oblivious to the impact of his words. As the day wore on, Lysander continued to navigate the opulent halls of his school, surrounded by friends who valued status and appearance. He relished the attention and the power it brought him, unaware of the cracks that began to form in his carefully constructed world. Oliver, on the other hand, found solace in the library, a sanctuary filled with books that whispered stories of adventure and acceptance. He sank into a chair, hiding his face in his arms as tears threatened to spill. The silence of the library enveloped him, but it couldn't drown out the feelings of inadequacy that flooded his mind. In that moment of despair, Oliver wondered if he would ever be seen, ever be valued. Did anyone notice him? Did anyone care? The questions echoed in his heart, unanswered and heavy. Back in the bustling halls, Lysander caught a glimpse of himself in a glass case, a trophy among trophies. His reflection smiled back at him, confident and unyielding. But as he turned away, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. Was there more to life than this facade of wealth and privilege? The thought was fleeting, lost in the laughter of his friends. As the day drew to a close, the two boys remained worlds apart, one basking in the glow of popularity, the other fading into the background, both unaware of the journey that lay ahead. Would their paths ever cross again? Would the walls they built around themselves ever crumble? Only time would tell. The days passed, and Oliver Finch felt the weight of his loneliness grow heavier. At home, he faced the harsh truth of his family's financial struggles. His parents worked long hours, often leaving him to fend for himself. The small apartment they shared was filled with the echoes of unpaid bills and the scent of worry. Oliver longed for acceptance in a world that seemed to overlook him completely. As he sat alone in his room, staring at his schoolwork, the memory of Lysander's dismissive words replayed in his mind. "Why would I help you?" The words stung like a slap. He thought about his classmates, those who floated effortlessly in circles of wealth and privilege, while he remained on the outside looking in. His heart ached for a friend, someone to see him, to understand his struggles. "Maybe I'll just keep to myself," Oliver whispered to the empty room, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. The thought of facing the school again filled him with dread. Each day at school felt like a reminder of his invisibility, and the thought of Lysander's arrogance made it worse. Meanwhile, Lysander Hawthorne walked the halls of the prestigious school, his confidence radiating like the sunlight pouring through the high windows. Yet, a subtle shift began to occur. His friends, once amused by his sharp tongue and dismissive attitude, started to exchange glances. They were beginning to notice the growing distance between Lysander and the rest of the student body, especially as Oliver withdrew from activities and social events. "Have you seen Oliver lately?" one of Lysander's friends asked, concern etched on her face. "He hasn't been around at all." "Who cares?" Lysander replied, shrugging off the comment. "He's just a nobody." But deep down, a flicker of unease sparked within him. He saw how Oliver's absence created a ripple in the social fabric of the school, but he quickly buried that thought. It was easier to dismiss the feelings than to confront them. Days turned into weeks, and Oliver's silence became a heavy fog that hung over him. He skipped lunch, choosing to sit on a bench outside, staring at the ground. The laughter of his classmates echoed in the distance, a painful reminder of what he was missing. Each giggle felt like a dagger, deepening the wound of his isolation. One afternoon, as Oliver sat alone, he overheard a group of students talking about him. "Did you hear? He's been avoiding everyone," one girl said, her voice laced with pity. "I wonder what's wrong with him." Oliver clenched his fists, feeling the sting of their words. He wanted to shout that he wasn't broken, that he was just trying to survive in a world that didn't want him. But instead, he remained silent, his heart heavy with despair. Lysander noticed the whispers and the way students would glance at him, some with raised eyebrows, others with frowns. He brushed it off, thinking it didn't concern him. But one day, during a history class, he caught a glimpse of Oliver sitting alone at the back, his head down, as if trying to disappear into the chair. For a brief moment, something stirred inside Lysander. "Why does he even bother coming to school?" one of his friends muttered. Lysander glanced back at Oliver again, and for the first time, he felt a twinge of concern. But as quickly as it came, he shut it down. "Whatever," he said, turning back to his friends. "It's not my problem." The rift between Lysander and the rest of his peers began to widen, but he continued to ignore the signs. It was easier to be indifferent than to confront the reality of Oliver's pain. Yet, as time passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He watched as Oliver withdrew further, missing classes and avoiding social gatherings, and a small part of him felt it was wrong. "Just let it go," he told himself, pushing the thought aside. But deep down, he knew that ignoring Oliver's suffering would not make it disappear. The walls around his heart began to crack, but he was still too proud to acknowledge it. The school year continued, and the distance between Lysander and Oliver grew. Each boy was trapped in his own world, unaware of how their lives were about to intertwine in ways they could never imagine. The atmosphere at Crestwood Academy was heavy with whispers and hushed conversations. Oliver Finch's suicide attempt sent shockwaves through the school, and the once vibrant halls now felt like a somber reminder of the pain that lingered. Lysander Hawthorne, usually wrapped in his bubble of privilege and confidence, found himself facing an unsettling reality. As he walked through the hallways, he could feel the weight of guilt settling on his shoulders. Students exchanged glances, some with pity, others with disdain. "Did you hear? They say it's all because of his bullying," a girl murmured to her friend. Lysander clenched his fists, anger and shame battling within him. He tried to brush off their words, but the truth was undeniable. He had played a part in Oliver's suffering. Later that day, Lysander found himself standing outside the hospital where Oliver lay. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air as he hesitated at the entrance. This boy, whom he had dismissed as inferior, was now fighting for his life, and Lysander felt a strange compulsion to see him. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open and walked inside. As he approached Oliver's room, he felt his heart race. The sight of Oliver lying pale and frail in the hospital bed hit him like a punch to the gut. The boy who once appeared so invisible now looked so fragile, and a wave of regret washed over him. "Why did I do this?" Lysander whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. He stood frozen for a moment, grappling with the reality of what he had done. The nurse glanced at him, her expression unreadable, and he took it as a cue to step forward. "Oliver," he said softly, not wanting to startle him. The boy stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment, recognition flickered across his face, but it quickly faded into confusion. "Lysander?" Oliver's voice was weak, barely above a whisper. Lysander could see the pain etched on his features, and it filled him with an overwhelming sense of guilt. I came to see you," Lysander stammered, feeling out of place in this sterile environment. I'm sorry." Oliver looked at him, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions, hurt, anger, and something else that made Lysander's heart ache. "Sorry for what? For being a bully?" His words were sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. Lysander swallowed hard. "I didn't realize how much my words affected you. I was wrong. I was just caught up in my own world. I never meant for it to go this far." "Caught up in your own world?" Oliver scoffed, his voice gaining strength. "You live in a different world than I do, Lysander. You don't understand what it's like to be ignored, to be pushed aside." "I know I don't," Lysander admitted, his voice trembling. "But I want to understand. I want to help." Oliver turned his head away, staring out the window. "Help? It's too late for that. You can't just turn back time. You can't unhurt me." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Lysander felt the sting of tears in his eyes but fought to keep them at bay. "I know it's not enough. I can't change what happened, but I want to do better. I want to change." At that moment, the school counselor, Mrs. Davis, entered the room. She noticed the tension and the pain etched across both boys' faces. "Lysander, thank you for coming," she said gently. "I think it's important we talk about what just happened." Lysander nodded, grateful for her presence. Mrs. Davis sat down beside Oliver's bed, her voice soothing. "Oliver, you are not alone in this. We all have a responsibility to support each other, and that includes Lysander." "I don't want his support," Oliver retorted, glaring at Lysander. "He's part of the problem." "I understand," Mrs. Davis replied calmly. "But it's important to recognize that change starts with acknowledging our mistakes. Lysander is here to learn and grow, just as we all are." Lysander looked at Oliver, hoping to convey sincerity through his gaze. "I want to be better. I want to stand up for people like you, not against them." Oliver remained silent, his expression unreadable. The room was filled with tension, but beneath it lay the possibility of understanding. As they sat together, the weight of their past actions began to shift ever so slightly, hinting at the potential for change. Lysander Hawthorne stood in front of his mirror, the sharp lines of his reflection staring back at him. He felt the weight of guilt pressing down on his chest, a constant reminder of the choice he made when he rejected Oliver Finch. The voices of his classmates echoed in his mind, their whispers linking him to Oliver's pain. He could no longer ignore the role he played in the suffering of a boy who had once been invisible to him. "What have I done?" he murmured to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. The luxurious life he had always enjoyed now felt hollow. The designer clothes, the lavish parties, and the admiration from his peers seemed meaningless in the face of the truth he was beginning to accept. Determined to change, Lysander made a decision. He would participate in the upcoming school project aimed at helping struggling students. It was a chance to give back, a way to start making amends. I need to do something, he thought, his heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. As he walked through the school halls, he noticed the faces of his classmates shifting. Some looked at him with judgment, while others avoided his gaze altogether. They knew about Oliver, and they knew about Lysander's part in it. He could feel their eyes on him, but he kept his head high. The project required students to form groups, and Lysander found himself standing in front of a group of Oliver's friends. He felt nervous, but pushed himself to speak. "Hey, can we talk?" he asked, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. One of the friends, a girl named Mia, crossed her arms. "What do you want, Lysander? You think you can just waltz in here after everything that happened?" "I know I messed up," he admitted, his heart racing. "But I want to understand what Oliver went through. I want to help." Mia narrowed her eyes, but after a moment, she nodded slowly. "Fine, but you need to hear us out. It wasn't just you. It was a lot of people." Lysander swallowed hard, feeling the sting of her words. "I understand. I want to hear everything. I need to learn." As they spoke, Lysander listened intently. Mia shared stories of how Oliver struggled to fit in, how the bullying pushed him to the edge. Each word felt like a knife, cutting deeper into his heart. He realized how blind he had been, how easy it was to dismiss someone else's pain when it did not affect him directly. "I never thought he would get to that point," Lysander said quietly, a lump forming in his throat. I thought he was weak." "Not weak, just different," Mia replied, her voice softening. "He was fighting battles you didn't see." Lysander nodded, his mind racing. He had always defined wealth by material things, by popularity and status. Now, he began to question that definition. What did it mean to be rich in a world where empathy was scarce? "I want to make it right," he said, finally. "I want to be better, for Oliver, for everyone." Mia looked at him, her expression shifting from anger to something softer. "It won't be easy. You'll have to face a lot of people who won't want to change." "I know," Lysander replied, determination filling his voice. "But I have to try." As the weeks passed, Lysander committed himself to the project. He spent time researching bullying and mental health, learning everything he could. He shared what he learned with his classmates, hoping to spark a change in their hearts too. One day, as he sat with Mia and Oliver's other friends, she turned to him and said, "You know, it's good to see you trying. Just remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being real." "Yeah, I get that now," Lysander said, a small smile breaking through the heaviness. "I've finally started to understand what it means to be truly rich." In that moment, Lysander felt a flicker of hope. He was beginning to redefine his life, not through wealth or privilege, but through understanding and empathy. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but he was ready to face it, step by step, with Oliver and his friends guiding the way. Lysander Hawthorne stood at the edge of the school courtyard, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. The sun shone brightly, but it did little to warm the chill in his heart. He had taken a bold step by deciding to speak at the upcoming school assembly. The weight of his guilt pressed heavily on him, but he knew he had to try to make things right. As he moved through the throngs of students, he sensed the murmurs surrounding him. Whispers followed like shadows. "Look at him," one girl said. "Thinks he can just change everything." Another voice chimed in. "What a joke. He was so cruel to Oliver." Lysander paused, his heart racing. He felt the sting of their words, but he pushed forward. He was trying to redefine himself, to be someone better. He glanced back at the small group of friends he used to rely on. They stood together, arms crossed, their faces drawn with skepticism. He could feel their resistance. "Hey, Lysander," one of them called out, stepping forward. "You really think talking about Oliver will help? You don't even know him." "I know enough," Lysander replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I want to help. I have to try. Good luck with that, the friend scoffed, and the group laughed. Lysander turned away, feeling the isolation settle in. It was a new feeling for him, being on the outside looking in. As the day of the assembly approached, Lysander prepared himself. He spent hours writing his speech, wanting to do justice to Oliver's story. The words flowed from his heart, each sentence heavy with meaning. He wanted to share the truth of how quickly life could change, how kindness could make a difference. Finally, the day arrived. The auditorium buzzed with energy as students filed in, chatting and laughing. Lysander's hands shook as he stood backstage, waiting for his turn to speak. He could hear the voices of his peers, a mix of excitement and skepticism. When his name was called, he stepped into the spotlight, the bright lights blinding him for a moment. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every eye on him. "Hello everyone," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I want to talk about someone very important, Oliver Finch." The room fell silent. He could see some students exchange glances, surprised by his choice of topic. Oliver was not just a name in our school. He was a person who faced struggles that many of us didn't see. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I was cruel to him. I dismissed him when he needed help. I thought I was better, but I was wrong. We never know what someone else is going through." As he spoke, he noticed a few students leaning forward, their interest piqued. He continued, sharing Oliver's story, the pain he carried, and the darkness that almost consumed him. "I wish I could take back my words and my actions," he said, his voice growing stronger. "But I can't. What I can do is ask each of you to be kinder, to look out for one another. We all have our battles. Let's not add to the pain." The room was quiet, the weight of his words hanging in the air. After he finished, a hush fell over the audience. He stepped back from the microphone, heart pounding. Then, slowly, a hand shot up from the back of the room. "Thank you for sharing, Lysander," a girl said. "We need to do better." "Yes," another voice echoed. "We can change how we treat each other." Encouraged by their response, Lysander smiled. He could see the energy shifting, a spark igniting within the crowd. Conversations began to bloom as students discussed kindness and acceptance, echoing the sentiments he had shared. As he left the stage, he felt lighter. The isolation he had felt earlier began to lift. He had opened a door, and now it was up to everyone to walk through it together. Lysander knew it would not be easy. Change took time, and the path ahead was uncertain, but as he looked around at the students engaging with one another, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could create a community of understanding. He took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The journey of empathy had only just begun, and he was ready to walk it. As the sun rose over the school, a new day began for both Lysander Hawthorne and Oliver Finch. They were both on a journey of healing, each learning from the other in ways they had not expected. Lysander felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he prepared for Oliver's return to school. He had spent the last few weeks reflecting on his actions, trying to understand the hurt he had caused. Oliver walked into the school with a mix of anxiety and hope. He had faced many challenges, but today felt different. He had his head held high, ready to confront the remnants of bullying that still lingered in the hallways. As he made his way through the crowd of students, he spotted Lysander waiting by the lockers. "Hey, Oliver," Lysander said, his voice warm and inviting. "I'm really glad you're back." "Thanks, Lysander," Oliver replied, feeling a flutter of appreciation in his chest. It was surprising to him how much a simple greeting could mean. "I wasn't sure anyone would care." Lysander shook his head. "I care. We all should." He paused, looking into Oliver's eyes. "I want to help. I know we've had our differences, but I want to make things right." As they walked together, Lysander noticed that some students whispered and pointed. He felt a twinge of anger at their actions. "Ignore them," he said, trying to reassure Oliver. "They don't understand what we've been through." Oliver took a deep breath, feeling a mix of fear and courage. "I'm trying. It's just hard to forget what happened." "I know," Lysander said softly, "but we can face it together. How about we work on that project for mental health awareness? It could really help others." Oliver nodded, a small smile creeping onto his face. "Yeah, I'd like that. It might make a difference." They spent the next few days planning their project, discussing ideas and sharing their thoughts. As they collaborated, they began to understand each other better. Lysander listened as Oliver spoke about his struggles, and Oliver learned about the pressures that came with Lysander's life of privilege. One afternoon, while sitting in the library, Oliver looked up from his notes. "You know, I used to think you were just a spoiled rich kid," he admitted, a hint of humor in his tone. "But you're different now," Lysander chuckled. "I guess I was spoiled in more ways than one. I never realized how much I needed to see the world through other people's eyes." He paused before adding, "I'm sorry for how I treated you." Oliver smiled, appreciating the sincerity in Lysander's voice. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." As their project neared completion, they planned a presentation for the school assembly. On the day of the event, both boys stood backstage, nerves tingling in their stomachs. Lysander looked at Oliver, who was fidgeting with his notes. "Are you ready?" Lysander asked, trying to sound confident. "Not really," Oliver admitted, "but I think we can do this together." With a deep breath, they stepped onto the stage. The gym was packed, students whispering and shifting in their seats. Lysander took the microphone first, his heart pounding. "Hi everyone," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "We're here to talk about something important: mental health." He glanced at Oliver, who nodded encouragingly. "It's something that affects many of us, often in silence." Oliver took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I want to share my story," he said, his voice growing stronger. "I faced bullying, and there were times I felt completely alone, but I've learned that it's okay to ask for help." The room fell silent as Oliver spoke, his honesty touching the hearts of his classmates. Lysander watched in awe, proud of his friend's bravery. After Oliver finished, Lysander took over again, sharing his own journey of understanding. "Together, we can create a school where everyone feels safe and valued," he said, looking out at the audience. "Let's stand up for one another." As they left the stage, the applause echoed behind them. Oliver felt a sense of relief wash over him. It was a new beginning, not just for him, but for Lysander as well. They had both found a new purpose in their friendship, one built on empathy, understanding, and the promise to support each other. Later that day, they sat together in a quiet corner of the school, reflecting on their journey. "I didn't think we could come this far," Oliver said, a smile lighting up his face. "Neither did I," Lysander replied, his heart full. "But I'm glad we did. We can change things, one step at a time." And in that moment, both boys knew they had found something special, a connection that would help them face the world together, and a friendship that would last a lifetime. Share this story if you believe that empathy and friendship can conquer even the toughest challenges. Leave a comment about a time when understanding changed your life, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one.